person who knows basically all the research on ADHD nutrition well, I'm finally spilling the beans. By the way, here is the outline, so if you just want to skip to wherever you want to go, there it is. My name is Annika, and I am one of the few ADHD nutrition research experts, so if evidence-backed nutrition hacks for ADHD is something that you're interested in, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified whenever I upload. My work is made possible by the NutriMind community members here on the screen. So if you have any burning questions about ADHD nutrition, I prioritize making content based on their questions. So you can also get access to my online library of ADHD nutrition research, a community chat where you can ask anything, support each other, I'm there too, and you get early access to content. So whenever you're ready to join the NutriMind community, you can tap the link in the description. So let's get into what I actually do as a person who has read all the nutrition research out there. How do I actually eat? So the first thing I want to say is that every single day is going to be different. So ADHD is a dynamic disability. For some people, it may not feel like a disability, but that's like the framework that I'm talking about it in because it is very disabling for a lot of people. And the thing is, we have to remember that it is dynamic. So it is different every single day. For me, I can go a few weeks with eating like the way that I'm going to talk to you right now. And then some days it's impossible for me to even, it's not impossible, but it feels impossible for me to even eat anything. And so we have to just understand that every single day is going to be different. We're never going to be perfect as much as we wish we could be perfect. It's not going to happen. And so allowing for these changes that are going to happen throughout our life is really, really important. We need to give ourselves the grace that we need for the day that we're going to be having. And just recognizing that is honestly the first step. So there's another thing I want to talk about before I get into what I typically eat in general. So this other one is called an adaptive intuitive eating model. So if you know anything about the intuitive eating model, you'll know that it feels kind of impossible if you have ADHD. So the intuitive eating model is a great model of eating, especially for people with mental health conditions. I'd say if you have a mental health condition, working with a dietitian who understands this framework and help teach you it is going to be so important because it helps us cultivate that bodily intuition that a lot of us don't have that big connection to. And it also helps us not get so focused on the numbers. So people with mental health in general mental health conditions in general are more likely to experience eating disordered behavior, whether that's orthorexia, anorexia, binge eating, bulimia. We are just at a higher risk for it based on how our brains work. And this is why I advocate for a lot of us to just approach things in the more intuitive eating style. However, if you have ADHD, you probably have tried to do something like this and then realized, wow, I feel like I cannot really trust my body to tell me when I'm hungry and what I'm hungry for. So a lot of us have really, really bad interoception or that understanding of our body cues. So for me, I do not get hungry until it is way too late. And then I'm hangry. It's like I went up. I did not notice that I was getting to the threshold. And then all of a sudden it was like a switch and I'm way past the threshold. And it's so hard to eat after you've gone past that threshold. So this is where I do more of an adaptive intuitive eating model with ADHD. So it's less of a, let's try to listen to our body, and more of a, I know my body doesn't like to talk to me, so here are the rules I'm going to set for myself. So the rules that I have set for myself are I have to eat 3 meals a day. And that's hard. It is hard for me, and I am in the research every day, and I am trying to do the best I can for myself, and it's hard. So if a professional person like who knows all this stuff is having a hard time, give yourself the grace to know that like maybe it's going to be really hard for you. This is where external supports are super helpful. So I have my husband. Honestly, if you are able to live with another person, if that's an ability you have, I'd recommend it. If eating food is a hard thing for you to do. Like remembering. I know some people with ADHD don't have this issue. So my sister, she tends not to have this issue, which is, I'm so happy for her. It sucks if you do have this issue because, I don't know. I feel like that's a whole nother topic that I could just talk about for forever. Just about like my experience with eating. Like what does it feel like eating for myself? And like all the other different experiences with eating with ADHD. So if you have any experiences with ADHD and eating, like what types of eating patterns you find yourself doing, I'd love to hear from you in the comments so that I can just get more data and talk about it. Because I have like this idea in my head, because technically there's like no real research out there on eating patterns in ADHD, just kind of annoying. There was a new one that came out in 2025 on snacking behavior in ADHD, which I should talk about someday. But anyway, side note. Yes, I'd love to hear from you. What is your relationship with food like? How do you tend to eat? Do you tend to forget more, or do you tend to do more of the binging behavior, or do you tend to just overeat, eating for stimulation, stuff like that? So I'm just curious. Anyway, adaptive intuitive eating model. Again, like I said, it's more of setting rules for yourself so that you can follow the rules instead of following your body, because your body isn't going to be telling you the rules as like the neurotypical would have those rules set. So for me, like I said, I have 3 meals a day. To do this, I have to have times for my meals. So between like 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., or it's like 7 to 9, honestly. It kind of depends on when I wake up. But like that's my eating window for the morning. And then I have 11 to 1 is my second eating window. And then my third eating window is like 5 to 7 p.m. This helps me because I love numbers. I love looking at the clock. I'm sure a lot of y'all will feel that. But I have really bad abilities to like actually perceive that time. So I'm very time oriented, but it's hard for me to, like, it's easy to just not see the time at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you have ADHD, you probably understand what I'm trying to say. Time blindness. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. But so since I have this rule for myself, I'll like take a look at the time when I'm working, like throughout my day, and then it'll be like 12:30, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's in my eating window time. Since I have this rule for myself, I need to take a break, even though I don't want to take a break. But I know it's super important for my body to take that break and to go eat something before my eating window is finished. Now, if I forget to eat in that eating window, am I not going to eat later? No, of course I'm going to eat when I notice I'm out of the eating window. Like, we still have to eat. But like this rule helps me make sure I actually do the 3 meals a day. So now that we got the intuitive eating out of the way, let's talk about what I actually try to eat as a person with ADHD who knows the research. So to begin, let's talk about the dietary guidelines. So every few years, the government, at least in the US, updates what are called the dietary guidelines for people with, just in the United States, for nutrition. And currently our example is the My Plate. So if you haven't seen this yet, and if you think it's still the food pyramid, it is not. This has been the thing since 2011. So the My Plate is a really great tool to look and see how can I eat to better my health. However, I would argue that for ADHD, it looks just a little bit differently. So based on the research, I would actually flip-flop the grain and the protein. So here with ADHD, I'd recommend us getting a little bit more protein than the grains. So instead of having 1/2 of the plate being fruits and vegetables, and then 2/3 being the grain, and then 1/3 being the protein, I would actually switch it so that the 1/2 of the plate stays the same as the fruit and the vegetable. And then 2/3 would actually be the protein, and then 1/3 would be the grain. So the reason for this is because, we'll talk about this in a little bit. If you have listened to my episode on protein and ADHD, you'll know that people with ADHD tend to need a little bit more protein than the neurotypical population. The reason for this mainly is because we really, really need our neurotransmitters. Plus, add into the fact that people with ADHD just have a lot of a hard time getting their protein in. It's helpful to focus on it a little bit more than the neurotypical population. So what I found is that people with ADHD who start eating more protein, they tend to feel a lot better. The difference here is that it's not asking for a lot of protein. Like, you don't need to have 1 gram of protein per your pound of body weight. Like, that is kind of excessive, if I'm honest here. But instead of the dietary guideline of just 0.7 grams per pound of per kilogram of body weight, we're going to want to look more towards 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Again, this is per kilogram of body weight, not per pound, so make sure that you are doing the proper conversions. In general, aiming toward 1.2 to 1.6 is really important for overall health. So even if you don't have ADHD and if you're just a parent listening to figure out what's good for your kid, it's still really important for you to be hitting that 1.2 to 1.6. It just may be more important for ADHD because it may help their symptoms a little bit more. So anyway, that all being said, like I said, I would personally switch the grain than the protein because it's really helpful for us to focus on the protein. And the grains don't do a whole lot for us. They are really, really important for our gut microbiome if we make sure that they turn into resistant starches. So this is a little bit technical here, but hear me out. So resistant starches are the starches that feed our butyrate-producing bacteria in our gut. So our gut in the ADHD realm, I'll be doing a episode on this one in the future, but in general, the ADHD microbiome does not produce effective amounts of butyrate compared to the neurotypical population. And so we really want to make sure that we are supporting the butyrate producing bacteria. One way we can do this is through introducing resistant starches. So resistant starches are starches that have been cooled down. You can reheat them and they will still have more resistant starch. However, if you just, like say you just make some rice. I do that. I love rice. But if you cool it down before you eat it, then it's going to actually feed your gut microbiome. And that is what we're aiming toward. So this is the same with pasta, with potatoes, any starchy carbohydrate. If you have that, I would recommend cooling it down before you eat it. And then, like I said, we would want to keep the other half the same, half of our plate fruit and vegetable. That is our ideal plate for ADHD, also ideal plate for just general health. The reason, again, is because fiber is incredibly important for ADHD. I'll be talking about this in a little bit with the practical aspect because honestly, visuals are not as helpful for me as numbers are, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But antioxidants are incredibly important for ADHD. We have research that looked at the dietary intake of people with ADHD and the neurotypical population. They looked at the antioxidant intake. It was approximately the same. Statistically, it was the same. So essentially, it just means we eat about the same amount of antioxidants. However, our antioxidant markers were significantly worse than the neurotypicals, which essentially means either we're not using the antioxidants correctly in our bodies, like our body isn't metabolizing them well, or it means we're using more of them than the neurotypicals. And both of those are likely true at the same time. So people with ADHD, we need to be eating a lot more antioxidant-rich foods than the general population, just simply because of the way that our body metabolizes and uses these nutrients. This is where eating your fruits and vegetables is super important because they contain antioxidants. The most effective antioxidants come from eating a variety of these different foods. So our goal is not just to eat enough, it's also to eat a variety of these foods. So I try whenever possible to have all the different colors in my day. At minimum, all the different colors in my week, But I mean, ideal world, we can talk about that. Ideal world, it'll be all throughout the day. So that could look like an orange. That is what color is that? Orange? Oh my God, that's horrible. It is an orange color. Banana, that's a yellow color. I could have a red bell pepper, that's red. Green, we could have broccoli. And then blue, okay, technically it's more like blue/purple. I kind of count like both of those. I don't even know if there's a real blue food. I mean, like blue carrot, I guess, but that's like more purple. So purple, blueberries, you could have a blueberry. And that covers like the spectrum. I also consider brown a color that we want to hit. So one thing that I like to hit with brown is cocoa powder or coffee. So both of those are plants, and they are both really good for us. That being said, coffee is a different topic in general with caffeine. If you want to hear more about caffeine, let me know. I should make something about that, but if you are really, really curious, I'll try to make it prioritized. Anyway, that all being said, that my plate was the general outline. Again, we're going to flip-flop them a little bit for more ADHD-esque things, ideally, for us. But then, if you're like me and you think numbers are a little bit easier to understand, what I do is my goal is to eat, at minimum, 2 fruits a day, 2 vegetables a day, and then 1 seed a day and 1 nut a day. So that hits basically all of our antioxidant and fiber goals for the day. It can be really hard to hit these goals. And the other thing to know is that these are serving sizes. So serving sizes, you are going to want to look and see how much is in a serving. Because, like, let's be honest, a lot of us will, like, eat a few Brussels sprouts and think that's a serving, and it's not. Or if you're like me and you're like, wow, I love green beans literally so much, and you could eat, like, basically an entire bag of green beans, that's like 3 servings of vegetables. So either way it goes, my goal in general, the first goal is just to eat 2 different vegetables, 2 different fruits. And if like that's too much, then just start off with 1. So really just meet yourself where you're at, start with the variety, and then go to the serving size. Or if it's better for you to start with the serving size, start with the serving size. It's really figuring out what's helpful for you and then implementing that in small successive steps. So that's the hard part, because with ADHD, we tend to like to go dive straight in, and it is not as sustainable as we'd like it to be. So just be very aware of your actual limitations and how to create sustainable change for these limitations. I think like that's the biggest thing I can say. Just be aware of who you are, what's realistic, and know that your goal of completely changing your diet is a little bit too intense, and it's not going to work. Unless you're hearing this and then your PDA gets super activated and now it's going to work for you. So I guess follow your heart. All right. Well, anyway, that being said, that is just the base. Ideally, we are eating actually more than this. Ideally, we are eating 3 to 4 different fruits a day and then 3 to 5 different vegetables a day. And then also on top of that, 1 to 2 seeds a day and then 1 to 2 nuts a day. So again, like it is a lot more than we think. A lot of us are not hitting our actual dietary recommendations. That is always the first goal, but this is just a simple way of thinking about it. There are ways we can sort of hide some of these things. That would be a different conversation. So for me, something I found helpful is making soups or making stir fries, where I can add a ton of these different things at the same time, and then it hits all of those areas and it tastes good. So really just figure out how to help yourself in these situations. And then so like that was the day, right? Like that was the ideal day. And we talked about the ideal meal, we talked about the ideal day. Let's talk about the ideal week. So on top of those few things, we want to be eating a salmon or shrimp or other seafood that you actually like to eat. We want to have one of those meals every single week to try to work toward hitting our omega-3, like the brain type of omega-3 supplement. It's not a supplement. I guess it's just a nutrient. We want to use those to help hit our omega-3s for the week for our brain. That's also why eating seeds and nuts are important, because they contribute to our overall omega-3 intake. However, the ones from seafood actually give us the ones that help our brain. So, if you listened to my podcast episode on omega-3s and ADHD, you probably know a lot more and it makes a little bit more sense. So if you haven't, I would recommend going back and listening to that one. Anyway, so that is one thing that you try to hit every single week. Try to hit at least one serving of seafood every week, minimum. Ideally, we are hitting more than one every single week. But is ideal life going to happen? Probably not. So let's just start off with realistic stuff. The other one that we want to try to eat is 2 bean dishes every single week. And I know that can be annoying if you are, like me, a Midwestern, very white person who doesn't like beans. Yeah, it is a struggle. So for me, I've been working on liking tofu and edamame, like that is the ones I'm working on. I am also working on liking more black beans and chickpeas. So chickpea pasta is actually a great option here. It doesn't have all the fiber that you get from just like the regular chickpeas, but it still does have a lot of those good nutrients. So finding ways that we can sneak in beans is always a great option. So they are one of the best foods that any person in general can eat. Beans have protein, they have fiber, they have fat, they are just incredible, and they have so many nutrients that a lot of us are lacking in. It is, honestly, as much as I hate to say it because I don't love beans, it is so important to eat them. So I love lentil soup, so I'll make lentil soup. I also blend beans up, like a can of cannellini beans, in with some jalapeno, cilantro, and then lime juice. And it makes this really tasty, like sauce, like a green sauce. Would recommend. But it's one easy way of kind of hiding those beans. So, yes, that is ideal week. On top of what I talked about with the ideal day and then the ideal meal. That all being said, like I said, this is ideal. It's not going to happen every day, and it can be really hard to implement, especially if you're not used to eating more whole foods. The goal is to start as small as possible and then slowly build up, because if we don't slowly build up, it's not going to be sustainable, and then we're going to be more likely to give up our goal of improving our ADHD with food. And the last thing I want to say is that as much as I wish food improved ADHD, it does not improve ADHD as much as other things will. So just keep that in mind as well. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this is going to take a long time. On average, we don't see improvements like the ones that we can notice for about 1 to 2 whole months. That's a long time. And we are not known for our patience. So just keep that in mind as well as you are working on improving your diet. Because honestly, it's hard to look at the long game when you're not noticing things immediately. So just keep that in mind, because it is going to be hard to continue to do this when you're not seeing results. But just remember that you're probably not going to see results until 1 to 2 months after you are doing this, and doing it consistently, as in almost every day. The other thing I want to say here is the 80-20 method is going to be one of your best friends here. If you don't know what the 80-20 method is, I'm super happy to tell you what it is, because that's how I live my life. Like almost every part of my life, I live with the 80-20 method. So what it is 80% of the time we are doing this. We are eating more whole foods. We are prioritizing all of these vegetables, all of these fruits, the protein. We are prioritizing doing all of those things. But then the 20% is like eating out or feeling okay with the fact that you are eating a more ultra-processed meal. I mean, honestly, I will go to Aldi. Like, we have emergency meals, is what I call them, because neither of us are going to want to cook a home-cooked meal every single day. Like, that's not realistic. But we will get pot stickers. Like, or we also get some egg rolls from Aldi, and then sometimes we get chicken strips from Aldi. Like, there are so many great opportunities here to find foods that still sort of fit into the ideal ADHD diet, that are still convenient to eat. And then recognizing, like, we can also try to prioritize more of those like fresh foods, those more whole foods. So that is personally what I do for the most part in my life. And you might notice that there's a difference between what I say online and what I personally do. So what I say online is that it is 100% okay to be eating most of these ultra-processed foods. Like, the most important thing for me is that you're eating. That is always the most important part. And yet, in reality, I don't eat a lot of ultra-processed foods. Like, I just don't. However, it's taken me a long time to get there. Plus, I have the privilege of having a stable place to live. I have the privilege of living close to a food place that has a lot of these cheaper food options. I have the privilege of being financially stable for the most part, and I have the privilege of having a supportive partner. Like, recognize that I have a lot of things in place that help me, and maybe you don't. That is where using your real life to create the steps that you need to take is really important, because I'm not representative of every single person. So I think, if you can just take anything out of it, is ideally we are doing something. Real life, it's probably not going to happen. The other part is that every single person is different. We need to make small changes, and then eventually we'll get to a point where we are hopefully a little bit more stable. And then again, ADHD and diet, elimination diets are not as effective as eating an overall healthy diet pattern according to our research. So just know that this step that you're taking to incorporate more healthy dietary patterns is going to be better for you than working on taking away all these different foods that we're worried about. So I hope that gives you some consolation that it's going to be okay to be eating these ultra-processed foods, because it's not as important as incorporating more of these healthy foods. So just take the pressure off, do what you can, and hopefully you'll be able to create more of a sustainable practice for yourself with nutrition. All right, well, thank you again so much for listening to this episode or watching it online if you are looking at it on YouTube. So if you don't know, again, my name was Annika. I am an ADHD nutrition research expert. If you want to help me and support my work, you can join the NutriMind community. I have the link in the show notes, and I would love to get to know you more and hear all of your thoughts. Otherwise, the other best way to support me, if you do not have the monetary means right now, is to simply subscribe or follow, and then comment, share, doing all of the things that actually help push my platform out there so that more people can be reached and so that we can really work toward helping our ADHD through nutrition. So thanks again.